Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening's episode. This evening's episode follows a very interesting concept that has come to me. It is the notion that the future is, in some sense, a parallel self. You know, the future of now comes across as a parallel self. And so in the subtitle, I've written Subtlety of Ideological Existence. And it's very interesting because for me, I personally believe everybody has two relationships with language. In one sense, there is your understanding of the meaning of a certain symbol or word, and then there is the generals, like the collective's understanding of a concept. So in some sense, every person has access. We can even put it in a different mode, where you have an observance of your own behavior, and then the rest of the world has a conclusion and observance of who you are. And when there's many individuals in one system, eventually these individuals will begin wondering about their sense of self in regards to the collective sense of self. So pretty much the child realizes the best game to play in town. Jesus, these headphones. Sorry guys, you gotta hold on for a second. I gotta go get headphones. Okay. All right, let's get to it. The future is a parallel self. I was diving into one's relationship with language and fundamentally their relationship with ideology. What that means is that you don't have just a relationship with those around you, you have a relationship with your own ideas. Sometimes your intelligence conceives imagery and sophisticated layers of language over this current physical phenomena you see, and sometimes the intelligence of others shapes the world that you will walk in. Life is a kind of there's a symbiosis of many dimensions in one. The one light beam, like on the back of the Pink Floyd album cover, goes through that prism and becomes various light, becomes the color spectrum. Okay, so we are in some sense the spectrum of one existential phenomena. That means if an extraterrestrial came and said, "What is humanity?" we would say it is the collective efforts of all human beings and their efficiency and inefficiency. That means everybody in the ship during a time of emergency where it's a storm or something, everybody suddenly knows their place. And as civilization becomes more turbulent, there's going to come more of a need for to be responsible for existence. So the more mistakes we make, the more the future generations will open their eyes and be like, "What's that noise?" So there is the relationship of self with self, there's the relationship of self with other, and in this relationship where there's self with other, in that other is included the world. So how you treat other people is actually how you're treating your world. Okay? However, in various moments you function based on different values, and the values change, based on how far an idea has been accepted by your conscious being, will suggest how like how the roadmap of destiny will look like. I'm just going to say it like this, that when I was growing up, the concept of past lives found me very quickly. That means just like how children play with toys, I played with spiritual notions and metaphysical ideas when I was young. Okay? I dabbled in them. I entertained the notion that there could be intelligence all around the universe, and I entertained the notion of a sort of timeline to the conscious entity. However, as the more I have lived on this planet, the more I have realized all my considerations are my considerations, and the truth of the matter transcends language, which means it is superior to the findings of any mind. That means we are kids in a playground and we're trying to find games to play. Okay, we're trying to make new games. We can say the efforts of all human beings' egos is that they have shaped themselves as a character in a story, kept their attention as a character in a story, and this character has a world to engage with. We, in some sense, honestly, evolution, its importance was how this phenomena could interpret data, and it suddenly had a new way of interpreting data, and our species had this leap of interpreting data in a more sophisticated way compared to other creatures on this planet. You see, again, we don't see dolphins making underwater cities, and we don't see lions building kingdoms. It is man. It is the what seems like but a chimpanzee and some other phenomena. You know, this body, I 100% agree with biological evolution. You know, because I looked at my hands and I looked at my body, and when I was younger, I thought of like, why do people like have to put a scarf around their neck to protect their chest area because it's vulnerable to low temperatures and whatnot. So I wondered about why we had to clothe ourselves. Okay. And then I began to see in our clothing, we protect certain areas of ourselves, the more vulnerable areas. And I noticed that the front of the person's body is vulnerable. And I did something which was honestly, it was strange what I did, is that I got on my four like hands. Okay, I tried to see if I was a four-legged creature, how would this biological design fit into that kind of situation? And I began to see it makes perfect sense why the chest is vulnerable. In some sense, the reason is because we were animals that, how can I tell you, we were on four. We were on four limbs. We evolved into now kind of sitting on chairs, crossing our legs, but that's the effort of 4 billion years of natural organization. So we can say that nature is constantly organizing itself. That's kind of like a universal law of intelligence. That's how we define intelligence, a reorganizing pattern, a reorganizing intelligence in some sense. And in this organization of nature, how nature has been both in static and dynamic ways organizing itself, eventually we are the conscious part of that. A lot of nature occurs unconscious. That means when you look at nature, you're like, it's as if the natural world doesn't need the human being's help. You see, it's like we shouldn't be wanting to save the planet because we're like Mother Earth. We're gonna protect you. Like that's a mythological approach. For me, the proper approach is the recognition that where is the value of your action generated? Okay, and the value of many actions which could perhaps change your civilization for the better will occur through a sort of future projection of the individual in the current moment. That means, let me tell you something that's going to astonish you. Right now, just like how you can remember, let's say yesterday or a few years ago, like one of your earlier memories, as you can remember your past in this moment. Interestingly, it's as if this moment is the past of a future moment you will be. Okay, if you just kind of pay attention to that, you begin to see it's as if the past is a memory for the present, and the present is a memory for the future, so it's pretty much just past and future. Do you see? It's as if all that's occurring in this in this plane of existence, is that everything is changing. Now we have chosen to get a collection of symbols, a collection of ideology. We have created, invented language. I consider language a technology. We have invented language. And in some sense, this language is a way for us, it's a way for us to try to make sense of change. Okay, and an approach was like our ancestors did this, pretty much the first human beings who began communicating with sound. It was like an urge. It was like as if the body was caged in silence. And eventually some moving phenomena, the spirit of evolution, in whatever spirit you hold the idea of the spirit. But in this, like, I don't know how to tell you, it's that it was unconsciousness that suddenly consciousness popped out. Do you see? Suddenly consciousness began growing all over the planet. Okay, and this consciousness came to a sophistication where the unconscious processes of nature for the first time became conscious free will. You see, it took us billions of years to even be in a position to even be able to acknowledge our free will. And our free will is fascinating because what is something that we feel we have and other animals don't? Of course, I've heard of like dogs dreaming and whatnot, but I'm telling you, it's as if the imagination is very powerful. Because sometimes your imagination is kind of like your antenna for unknown ways that nature moves, which you have not yet processed. Okay? So the future, we see it finds itself in, like, how can I tell you? Right now, if you were to wonder about your future, you will notice a sort of abstract, a sort of freedom, subtler freedom of your mind to position abstraction wherever you like. So in some sense, when a person in the current moment wonders about the future, they're painting a picture. Now, the colors of this picture on this canvas, are colored by the past. So we can say that the past is strangely, constantly, chemically reacting to becoming the future. Okay? And the future is very fascinating because its purpose is as if it's not meant to end. Sometimes we think this world is here for us. Like the ancient Egyptians thought the whole world was only there for them. Ra, the god, the sun god, and some said had given them this raw earth. And so every civilization, it is fair to say, that makes the first kind of intermediate conclusion that the world is built for them. You know, it takes a lot to be able to realize you're an intermediary. Do you know? Like, it's not easy. I don't know how so many people feel like, um, like religious stories have a significance because they suggest a time where one man's new action rejustified reality. You see, religion was in some sense the voice of one man shaping the voice of the minds of many to come. You see, for me, it's like religion is like heritage. It is art. It is artwork that should be held in the greatest museums. It should not be something that is banished and destroyed. You know, it's as if like sometimes I wonder the atheistic approach looks at the theistic approach, and in some sense, what is like, brah, I'm gonna instantly dismantle all your abstract beliefs. You know, that's it's a sort of game, and for many atheists, they consider it as a sort of also, how would I say it, like a mission. They're here to save the world from irrationality, right? There's a very profound thing. George Orwell wrote the novel 1984, and Aldous Huxley wrote the novel Brave New World. And it was showing the various dangers of one, an outside force controlling the individual, and how can I tell you? It's as if two types of illusion were confronted in that book, illusions of the world. Okay? And what I'm trying to tell you is that as we wonder more about the objects, the world can just be objective. You just like how they say there's something in health where they say it's the said principle, where your physical body adjusts, okay, to an environment. Let's say you're like one of those people who has a night shift at your job. So your body just adjusts to that way. Like you sleep in the day, wake up at night. How shall the words of man change the worlds of men? The relationship comes down to something from the unknown suddenly becoming known to itself. As it became known to itself, it wanted to attain the most ultimate knowing. And that's pretty much the peak of both Western and Eastern Enlightenment. Okay, Enlightenment ideas. As the mind charged at the unknown, that means, trust me, I believe everybody's ancestors, there were less distractions back in the day. Not just physical distractions, but I mean like people's body had to survive at a higher level of savageness, but their minds were much more quieter because they had not been exposed to certain ways that media has torn man's mind. This evolutionary animal found a way to create a trap for itself. And the reason was that the evil of the world is a blessing. It is a blessing in disguise because the moment the conscious will can confront the chaos, it is given access to the order. Once you confront the ultimate chaos, you confront the ultimate order. You see, this is why no being should be afraid of suffering. Don't be afraid of, in some sense, your death. Don't be afraid of it. The ancient mystics said, die before you die. which was a very profound notion. That means discover the truth of the moment, and then your knowing is ultimate. It's an instantaneous contentment with just being here. This instantaneity is prior. It is prior to the definitions of the world. It is prior to how the child's mind was conditioned into being a sort of character in a story. It is the ultimate enlightenment resolution, the ultimate mystical resolution. It is when self and the world were no longer inseparable. The child remembers a memory before it learned language, and it was simply a moment of sight and a moment of ultimate freedom. You see, it's as if freedom was so free, it was so free that it began to create chains. And so this sort of ultimate power made chains on itself, and eons passed. It was like the mistake of existence, okay? Trust me, it's not just people that make mistakes. Universal sectors make mistakes as well. It's personhood is just a glare in the eye of a bigger truth. And this truth doesn't mean it is God, or it is energy, or whatever. It transcends all of man's cultures. Do you see? Find the new, and the past will never have existed. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that we consider ourselves as temporary beings. There was this ancient notion of to die before you die. The depth of that meant a kind of realization of your presence beyond your personality. So, rather than you thinking that you're somebody who was born and is going to die, you begin having this approach and this sort of recalibration with your moment that you are present prior to any definitions, prior to having any thoughts on the day. Simply just be here in the world first. Okay? And then you come to your presence. Okay, you're just present, and as life happens, watch it, watch your life, or it will fall through your fingers. Osho was known to say the story where he said this, in the Sufi tradition, in this city, this guy died after 70 years. And after 70 years of death, in that kind of ambiance, after, in that mysterious way, he was like, after 70 years, the moment he died, he realized, in some sense, he was alive. Sometimes you don't realize what you have until you use it, until you lose it. Both sentences can apply. You come to a sort of acknowledgement and acceptance of your presence of being. Then whatever you do becomes easier. because there is no longer a denial of a better state to yourself. Now, the whole point of this talk is that I in some sense want to talk about how, and how internally, perhaps, uh, not perhaps, but internally, the sense of a future self comes into being. And it arises from, in some sense, it's kind of like a reproduction. It's like two forces come together and a new dimension is created. So when there is unknown phenomena and when there's known phenomena, the mind that witnesses the relationship of the known and the unknown is generating imagination. Okay, and that imagination it enters your subconscious as a subtler sort of freedom. And as you accept life, greater levels of the way it's here opens up to you. It's very funny. When you're fighting with something, you don't actually see the thing you're fighting with. But when you stop what doesn't work, suddenly what works comes to you. As I was introduced to the concept of a past life in my youth, I eventually, not sure we can say scripture or writings. I saw a notion that you can get not only step out of karma into a sort of enlightened state, you in some sense can, uh, how would I say? Sorry guys, I can't find the right words to kind of share that image, but I guess I'm okay. The mind generates images of itself. These images eventually become dynamic. As they become dynamic, you become this sort of ego that is like you become this kind of moving kind of accumulation of all your experiences in one moment. And as you look at others, due to your sense of self, you begin projecting your sense of self in others. That means the way you value yourself, you suddenly see that's how much you're valuing others. If you don't care about yourself, it's very easy to be cruel and violent. If you care about yourself, you also see that same amount of care and value also in others. So you stop fighting with your world, disturbing it, and then your imagination starts kind of opening up like a lotus. You begin to see that in states of peace and states of calm and states of self-awareness, the awareness and the self suddenly are noticed to be inseparable, and the inseparability of the self and the awareness is the watcher of the self. You suddenly become the watcher of time. You become the watcher of space. You become the watcher of every conception that you have held in the moment. Okay, and when you realize this, you realize it was from this sort of state, it was from the witness of the moment that the idea of the future was born. So in every moment of your life, how your intelligence is generating and responding to the stimulus and to the environment is suggesting how your system of organization is occurring. That means there have been times that I've looked at the mirror and I've seen a weak man. And there's been sometimes I've looked in the mirror and I've seen an unknown strength. And it's one of those situations where you recognize the mind constantly is trying to interpret, as if the mind is not tormented, but kind of kept between two states of being. It wants to be a physical phenomena, yet it sees there's something more, so it suddenly wants to be that something more. There's moments in your life where you will be convinced by knowledge, but there will be moments in your life where you will be conceived of the unknown, you know. And that's the problem, you know. I really, I honor Rene Descartes, the French philosopher, yet I feel he was on a fool's errand, because his approach was a sort of methodical doubt. And of course, he was lucky because he discovered that he can't doubt the doubter. So he doubted it. It's as if he thought the world was a simulation, and he was doubting it, doubting it, doubting it, until he wondered there's one thing you cannot doubt. And that is this kind of isolated, subjective thinker. He realized the idea of himself, which is translating and receiving the world, was his generation. So you begin to see that the world you actually see is not the real world. So you begin to see a sort of hollowness in your beliefs due to existing in a changing universal sector. You see, if the beliefs of man, it's like this: if your ideas don't change faster than your body, you will become a more physically fit, like you will become more still. You will the world will become um, the world will become a cake for you. um, how we value our who we know ourselves to be, like whatever, like how you value yourself right now will suggest how many opportunities you will take. It will suggest what you will do. And this value of self, if you take the mystical approach, if you truly go within, you will realize it is a novel moment. You will realize you will come to a moment of instantaneous ultimate freedom. That means between the sentences was the truth of where all the words on the empty page stood. That means we're going to see that, you know, man will find God and say, God, what's the point of all this? And God will look at man and say, how do you know I'm here? How do you know that there is a purpose? And so you see the value of the depth of the mind in a sort of ability to envision beyond the beyond. So it's not that we should think our path when we wonder about ourselves in the future. Most people are like, okay, I visualized it, now what? So I'll tell you this: I want you to wonder about a future and look at that visualization or imagination or that thought, and look at it so deeply to wonder how it would be real. You see, whenever you wonder about what is real, what is true, you suddenly come to the present moment. But whenever you wonder about any other sort of game, you see it's not that the physical world is an illusion. Some yogis went too far, I believe. They misunderstood a sort of subjective landscape for actually an objective landscape, so they thought they have to leave the physical world, you know. And I feel that was wrong. This is why the idea of heaven was phenomenal for the time that it was introduced, but it was a thought that was a seed that must be watered. And you got to understand, culture and civilization must be watered by the attention of the beings in it. Okay, so that's our at least social responsibility. We're not here just to pick up trash. We're here to fix the systems that create trash. You're not just in life to just get by one day. You're here trying to trying to solve this incredible kind of puzzle. Okay, nowadays children don't play with puzzles, and if they do, they're playing it on their phones. Okay, but a puzzle is something where both the mind and the body unite in one pursuit. It's very funny. I find that the inferior mind feels that it will it will find knowledge uh, if it looks at what it knows, like if it increases what it knows. And there's another approach that truth is not in what you know, it's in what you don't know. And perhaps you will perceive it and feel like you cannot know. And then suddenly comes a sort of strange, in an intelligent universe, a hollowness to your ideological frame, a hollowness to the subtlety of how we have kept existence just trapped in a story, and it needs to be freed. From the cages of language, the world will be liberated. And once it is, then comes the new renaissance. It's be fascinating. Children will no longer wonder about what they're going to do in the future. They're no longer going to wonder about what they're going to do about the past. They're just going to be in their present moment, and they're going to realize the value of life. You live every day once, you don't have time to not be yourself. All those children trying to be like other people is wrong, you know? Um, okay. So let's say your subjective reality is parallel to your objective reality. So when we wonder about the future is a gift that is to be received in the unknown. It has not come yet. Yet we are being the memory. We are designing what the future will remember. Okay. There's a quote from Isaac Bashevis Singer, and he says, "Our knowledge is a little island in a great ocean of non knowledge." See, that's even a way of saying it. When the ideas of you are more real than what you actually are, you will get trapped in a sort of virtual reality of a belief, okay? You see, it's very funny. We have invented objectively virtual reality, but our imagination is, and our what we consider to be the realm of the mind is it's a like it's a subjective virtual reality that's naturally being conducted. You see, the reason we think the world is a simulation, okay, it's because that's the only place consciousness can go. You first evolve beyond your body, then you evolve beyond the body of the world. Eventually you come to the mind of the person, and then eventually you evolve from the mind of the person into the mind of the world. You come from the mind of the world to eventually, very poetically I'm saying this, to the soul of the body, and then eventually you evolve from the soul of the body to the soul beyond the soul of the world. And eventually you come to a state where no longer a mind is needed. Do you believe? And you should not, but you should experience. There are many veils that conceal reality, ladies and gentlemen. These veils are primarily the impact of language on the intelligence. Okay, so I want children not thinking that they know how smart they are. I want children realizing they're unknown. It's kind of like, believe it or not, your talents are these superpowers that arise if you acknowledge how there's many ways your intelligence can grow if you don't keep it trapped to just a routine way of doing things. It's like, think of it this way. Any temporary creature would say, okay, it makes sense to have a new experience every day. And our civilization, culture, and economy is not made like that. It's like people go on repeat journeys every day. Okay, and it's because the economy is not giving them much options. And so the economy is not giving them much options. It's because the society has not given much options. And when there is not an evolution of the minds of people, then they can be enslaved, and they deserve to be enslaved because they have not chosen to see beyond. Okay, a person who doesn't want to break their chains, has does not have the ability to break them. And the mind plays that way. You see, I find very fun. This is going to be a very fascinating notion, what I'm going to say, but it's kind of unique. This kind of hypothesis I have. Okay, in my experience, it's a theory, but I guess I'll say it to you as a hypothesis. And it's this notion that back in the day they considered life to be made of five elements actually, but I'm going to tell you the four: earth, air, fire, water. Okay, so people saw the way of these substances behave, and they considered them as elemental forces. Now, because your mind copies reality to play with it, like is it is like a lay is like it's like you putting a shirt over another shirt. It's that sort of multidimensionality. I'm trying to tell you, the current mainstream, the way they think about our civilization's future is like somebody Wikipedia, like going on Wikipedia about riding a horse, reading about how to ride a horse, reading a book on how to ride a horse, but not actually going and riding a horse. Okay, and the self-help industry would disappear in an instant if people help themselves first with their own intelligence, with what is real to them. Of course, the path of the sadhu, the seeker, the one who sought a sort of union in a transcendental state as a seer of thought, it's very fascinating. You're left after you have hated the world. You have nowhere left to go but to love it, and that was a sort of ultimate conclusion. It's as if reality, the stars, the planets, many galaxies, they are kept in empty space as one. And it's as if that's the compassion of the force of empty space. It maintains many at once. And when you look at the depth and the profoundness of your mind, you're maintaining many memories, many moments of you experiencing this life at once. And so that's the very profound, because for the first time, subjectively, you become a pilot of consciousness. You can navigate the plane of existence, which is the way your attention steers your brain. And that attention is very pure and very hilarious, because it's like we'll go looking into the depth of the brain. We'll be like, where is this kind of process of consciousness we're looking for in the brain? And eventually we will come to the realization the brain is an instrument being kept, being played by a field of intelligence. That field of intelligence is samadhi. It is union. It is divine union. When you are no longer a thought to yourself. And that's kind of where we find in at least modern culture maintains the idea of true love. And that idea should be protected. It should be like, it's very strange, but it should be protected even by those who can never find it. Because it is an opportunity for a graceful ignition of a new path of life. I don't know how to say it. It's as if you love someone when the thought of them no longer is important to you only. Who they are as a being is important. How they are being is important for you. And eventually you will come to a point where, it's very strange. I said very poetically, but you fall in love with the intelligence of your world that is being you in the moment. You find a sort of remembrance. It's as if all the nostalgic moments you've had in your life suddenly explode in a supernova explosion, like that kind of explosion. And eventually you find the solace and the solitude of lifetime. Suddenly your mind moves with serenity, a new force, a force of alignment. That means once you find a serene state, the greatest ideas will come to you and ask if you will allow them to enter the world. The mind can become very animated, and it just like the volume bar, just like the volume bar on those old school speakers, the circular volume bar, like similarly, your mind can go into your attention, can navigate. And as you navigate your attention, you become what I say, a pilot of consciousness. You're no longer just, nature is no longer piloting your consciousness from the unconscious processes of this world. You have become a free will, and how dare this free will, after taking it 4 billion years of evolution to come here, for the creature not to think, for it has to be confidence. It has to be confident, you know? The reason I'm saying this is very crucial, because doubt is the loss of an opportunity. The future is a parallel self because the future is a generation that is being witnessed. So the first self is the witness, then the second self is the objective body, then the third self is the subjective being. Okay? And you'll notice your thoughts change quicker than your physical body. Okay? And you're going to notice your physical body changes, yet the watcher of it in the waking state, what you are truly, it's as if it has been authorized to be ever present, because it is. Sometimes it's not like the person has to do something, it's kind of like the person already is their moment. Like the endless dormant blessings of your ancestors upon the future suddenly become activated. We save the world from the blindness of the species first. Then we save the world from the inefficiency of the species. And then we will be in the presence of the ultimate laws of the universe. The laws that are not just governed by our minds, but also governed by our heartbeats. I feel we can be an incredible memory for this universal sector as a civilization. And for the religious mind, we become the graceful memory of God. That means the way we conduct our civilization is God is watching. As a religious person, I'm saying this to those of you who are listening who are religious. You acknowledge this God you see, but you acknowledge the opportunity given. And the opportunity being given is that God doesn't want you paying attention to you. It's as if the father who had a son, and he's like, son, why are you talking to me? Go talk to your friends outside. Go discover the world. You're here. And it's one of those notions where man acknowledges how there is a sort of universal intelligence at work that is watching. That means we could be, I don't want to say the specimen. That's too, like, Western sci-fi, but like we are in some sense performers in a universal stage of existence. Okay, and there's many ways that we can be washed, because I noticed this. I was like looking at an ant when I was young, like in the yard. I was looking at an ant kind of moving on like this tile, and how it was kind of like changing angles, and the ant could go whatever, like we can't climb up straight buildings, but the ant could climb, you know and how would I say it? It's like when I saw an ant and I realize I am seeing the ant, I realize perhaps that we could be ants, and there could be higher forms of intelligence watching us. You know, pretty much, it's very funny. Like, you can say that kind of the story of humanity goes in this way, where a group of ants suddenly noticed the kid in the backyard that was watching them, and one of the ants went to all the other ants and he said, "Kids, like he went to the queen of the ants and said, 'My queen, we're being watched by higher intelligence, higher life forms.'" And the ant queen was like, "We don't believe in that. We don't believe in that, buddy." And if the people, the ant queen was like, if the people find out there's a higher power, they will no longer need their queen. Imagine, like, this could be a story. So similarly, as ants could make a philosophy, their own philosophies about the human being watching them, for the human being watching them, it doesn't matter. The footsteps of that human being will dictate the disasters of nature we see. I feel it's very unique because a religious mindset will see a natural disaster and be like, "Oh my God, this is the wrath of God. This is the end of days," you know. But a non-religious mind would look at this and be like, "Damn, man, nature's this being too stormy." It's like we don't give it that interpretation, the secular mind, and so it's one of those things where that's the idea. We are a pattern of the truth, but we cannot be all truth. Okay? That means similarly, we cannot just all have beliefs. Society should not be too much belief based. Okay? It should be more exploration based. That means we should give freedom of mind to people, because if their mind is not free, then why are they in, like, the problem with violence, evil, and cruelty is that it's unnecessary. Trust me. So I see so many people, they're kind of raised like religious, and suddenly they have a, like, they jump to the opposite and they become, like, how would I say it, like one of my cousins was talking about like Satan worship and shit. I was like, oh Jesus Christ, man. And so I, like, and it was one of those situations where I could tell you, it's not Halloween. We can all dress up in different ideas and act as if they're true. I mean, what is that? It is the clarity that is required in finding the most efficient approach. If the way you're living is not efficient for your civilization, then I don't know what you're doing here. You're similar to that squirrel. Okay, you're similar to that. Do you understand what I mean? Like, our consciousness demands responsibility. That's the point of evolution. For it's like a part of existence wasn't responsible for itself, now it became responsible suddenly. Okay, we began realizing it's valuable, for the like the animal understood, holy shit, I gotta eat something, and started eating. you know and then the urge of survival was kind of pushed by biological forces into a subjective current day kind of metamorphosis of intelligence. There's a very nice quote from um, Rumi, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. He says, let me see if I can remember the exact quote. I gotta find it. Hold on, guys. This is worth the wait. Okay. Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi says, I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except truth doth perish. The way the mind has been able to engage the unknown was to personalize it. In our efforts of personalizing ourselves, we began personalizing the world. Suddenly, we saw, you know, gods and mystery and the supernatural everywhere because we were no longer dictating what is valid by an outer force, mainly by our inner being. I talk about the inner and the outer, but I want to tell you eventually you will come to see the inseparability of them. You will begin to see your outer phenomena has meaning internally to you. When you go look at this internal meaning doesn't need an outer, it's like itself. So there are moments on this planet where you will feel your mind that's kind of projecting a body, and there will be moments where you'll feel like typically, you know, like you're a body howling a mind, howling a brain around that's projecting a mind. Rumi has another quote where he says, "We began as mineral, we emerged into plant life, and into the animal state, and then into being human, and always we have forgotten our former states, except in early spring when we slightly recall being green again." His quote right now, he says, "I'm in love with no other than myself, and my very separation is my union. I am my beloved and my lover, I am my knight and my maiden." Okay. Okay, so he's pretty much saying he's an independent person. John Adams says, "You will ever remember that all the end of study is to make you a good man and a useful citizen." Chuangzi from China says, "The portal of God is non-existence. All things sprang from non-existence. Existence could not make existence existence. It must have proceeded from non-existence, and non-existence and nothing are one. Herein is the abiding place of the sage." There's a quote from Charles Mackay. He says, "Men, it has been well said, think in herds." Oh, sorry, I'll say it again. "Men, it has been well said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one." Yup, that's a failed system. Rumi says, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." Rumi says, "When you do things from your soul, you feel a river of joy within you." And I feel that's that kind of ultimate state everybody's kind of looking for. Rumi says, "Seek the wisdom that will untie your knot. Seek the path that demands your whole being." Jim Rohn says, "Happiness is not something you postpone for the future. It is something you design for the present." Abraham Lincoln is known to say, "The best way to predict your future is to create it." Like, that's a badass quote. So, anyways, guys, I guess I'm going to end off soon. I just wanted to tell you that you got to be mindful of how thought animates itself and how you are not a thought. I'm saying that very boldly. And that's how you recognize the subtlety of ideological existence. Because if you looked at a tree and you never thought, if you thought you were the tree, it's like, let me say it like this. Somebody said like this, like, you can only see the tree because you're not being it and you're outside of it. Okay? So in some sense, what you observe, you're not. So in some sense, when you kind of observe how thought is like a design in an invisible room, you kind of see in the same way you watch your mind as it generates. And you automatically re-update your intelligence through that. As you learn from yourself, all the teachings of the world around you shift. They shift in accordance to the self that is experientially changed. It's very fascinating. There should be further study done in how the mind is not just a language-based phenomenon, not just a phenomena that can be explained in language. There are many realms of experience being avoided because there's no language for it. There isn't ideas for it. Without honesty, your intellect will be a fool. And that's very crucial to remember as well. So study how your vision is being the now where the future arises from. Much blessings and namaste. Thanks for tuning in.